laboratory mice care currently, and how it has changed in time with time. And this is just a much more modern of how you actually care for mice. So they don't anymore put them into giant containers and like vats of like this Universe 25 or anything. There's humane laws that govern it both on the national level and at the university level as well. So animals are much better cared for. So we get to see that here. They're checked. They're weekly cleaned out. Bedding, food, water, enrichment, like the tunnels. Right, those tunnels, which seem like a little thing, it provides them with an extra stimulus, and that has been shown to be important for their health and happiness. Like you can actually sequence and get stress hormone elevation without it. And so in that, Universe 25, there wasn't any of these like external stimuli that the mouse could have gotten to, which in turn led to probably some of that collapse in the behavior. Yep, Barracks toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls. It's just they enjoy it. And they just crawl through it, and that like mode of going through is beneficial for the mice. Well, not just the privacy, Maddie, but also the texture has been shown to be important too. So if you give them plastic tubes, it's not the same because the plastic isn't textured but totally smooth, and that doesn't have the same effect on them. So they need something textured, and that like the cardboard texturing is enough to give them a little bit of extra stimulation. And then they also, like when they're transferring the cages, like it says, there's transferring of some of the elements too that like keeps the smells in, so they are familiar with it. Do mice need variety? Was that a major part? Like in the yes. So Dame Karen, one hypothesis is that it would have been different had there been some flavor of enrichment. They also have, there's other enrichment items that I've seen in the past as well, especially in certain experiments where it's almost looks like beads hanging from the ceiling, and they have to walk through these strings of beads to get to the other side of the cage, and then they interact with the beads as well. And so that little extra bit of interaction increases the stimulation that they have, and they get to learn and be a little bit more social when they're in the cages behaving. And yeah, Barracks, their fur looks much healthier. Like these animals look much healthier than what we saw in that, like, granted it was a grainy video from those experiments in the 60s, but it looks far better. Yeah, the beaded houses. I can try to find an image real quick while you guys are watching this video. I can maybe even find it now. Let's see. Because I remember when I was an undergrad, we did a paper in one of the classes talking about this kind of enrichment behavior, and we were able to talk to the authors that published on the paper, and I remember I asked them, I'm like, what on earth is this beads stuff?
Enter Newman and...
Here we go. Pull it over here. Alright, I'll finish this. I have a nice video on it too. Oh, turn into the great owl and release them. I mean, I just worry, Maddie. I worry. I don't want to... My dad was a mouse / opossum / cell culture researcher, and so I saw kind of firsthand as well, like taking care of the mice and taking care of the opossums and what that was like. And I just don't have the stomach for that. I can take out flies and ants. Like even now when I do stuff like that, I still have to think to myself, okay, I'm killing this animal for this scientific question, not just because I loosey-goosey want to kill things. And that's, I think, how all scientists should think, even if it's just a fruit fly. But I don't, like, even if it was like that same mentality for mice, it just would be far too difficult to do. No, Maddie, it's I know, I'm just trying to justify like why I'm a little loosey-goosey on that front. As Elf mentioned, enrichment is so crucial for all animals. It's 100% true. So we've kind of pivoted over from the experiments that were done. Let's take a look and see what enrichment activities there are for mouse cages. Because I think it's an important pivot point to talk about how research has changed from the time where the experiment that we were talking about in the movie took place versus like some of today's enrichment and the changes. There you can see two different bead units that they can interact. These are the little beads, Dame Karen, and they also have like these connecting tunnels, and there's the food source. The water source is hanging down there, so a lot more. And it seems like it's cage dependent, and like dependent based on where it is. Oh, no. The barcode is on the tube, not the mouse. The mouse is totally set to go. Although there are, Dame Karen, some instances where the individuals do get barcoded, but it's usually like by an earmark or like something like tagged on their ears to indicate like individuals, so that you can put them back into the nest, and then you can like track them over time. Like if you take one out and you train it a certain behavior, and then you put it back with the colony, so you can like re-identify it. So there are like those kinds of barcodes. The ear tags, use them for birds and dolphins and cats. Yep. And there's for insects, Dame Karen, depending on the size, you can tie little metallic wires around the thorax or the abdomen. Usually the thorax is the better one, because you can get a little tight little knot around them. Or you can paint them too with a color. Or there's a thing called fly dust. So for fruit flies, you can coat them in a dust. It's a colored dust. It takes them a couple of hours to clean off, so you can track individuals for a few hours on that way. See, so this is kind of what that original study was missing, is that normally if you take in the ecology of a mouse, it has all these like interactions that it can go. Like it can go like tunnels and like digging things, and so when you put them in such a barren environment, that also detracted from their ability to interact and like get enrichment, and that's what caused probably like the click formations as well. But we don't know like what genetic changes accompanied it. Mice and rats are both very social. Yep, they have huge social influences and social behaviors, where a lot of experiments are even centered around like them interacting between each other. It is fiddly, Dame Karen, especially because they're all wiggling. You have to use like a tiny little string to tie the knot around them. You have to hold on to them with a little forceps. Like, it's a whole thing. We had a chrysalis in the front garden. We hope it to... Oh, very cool, Carlos. What kind? Is it, do you think, a butterfly? Does it look like a monarch? In Samuel, there are experiments that actually probe the social behavior of rats and mice. So one is a food test. So basically what you do is you feed a rat a food and you coat it with an odor. In most experiments, it's done with a cinnamon-based odor. So you coat it with the cinnamon, and then you let another mouse smell the breath of the first mouse, and they're actually separated by a little wall. So they can smell each other, they just can't touch each other. And so the learner will smell the breath of the demonstrator, and what ends up happening is they learn that the food that smells like cinnamon must be good. And then if you give them a choice of different foods types, but there's, let's say, the same food, but one is laced with the smell of cinnamon, they'll prefer the one with the cinnamon because the social interaction they had said that that was a good food source. Just like a pretty rudimentary one. Yes, please tag Carlos. Or Carlos, if you're on, I can't remember if you're part of the Discord or not, feel free to post it in the animals channel as well, because I'm sure a lot of the party people would want to see that. And there's the link again if anyone wants to. But yeah, Samuel, that's one of like the standard rat learning and memory experiments, and it's based on that social behavior. There's also ones that involve burying marbles. So they're more likely to bury marbles if they're, I think it's low stress with other individuals, and if they're higher stress and they're isolated, it takes them longer to bury a marble, and it's like taking advantage of like their natural burying behavior. There's a third one that you can teach fear behavior with them. You can do either electric shock or you can use fox urine, because they have a natural fear of fox urine. With mice, you can use cat urine and have the same effect too, which is pretty cool. Thank you, Carlos. I'd love some donuts, Dame Karen. I love some donuts. So even things like this in the experimental setup they didn't have. So like these little places to climb on, right? It was never at all built like this. So like having these extra bits in there probably would have changed the course of the experiment, but it's again difficult to say because it's kind of a violation of modern standards, as it were, ethical standards. And you even say the little hanging bits to it. all trying to figure out how to try to get out. It's tough to argue like what exactly they're thinking, right? Like, does a mouse have a perception of the outside world from the cage? Is it just standard exploratory behavior? So even things as simple as an insect, right, have this. It looks like they're trying to escape, or is it they're just like kind of ascertaining their surroundings and kind of figure out, okay, these are my bearings, these are the things that are here. And then mammals also have an extra layer of complexity. They do play, right? And so playing, like play fighting between like young adolescent male mice is how they learn, and that social interaction is important. So are they also just having fun? I don't know. It gets very easy to anthropomorphize and like figuring out how to superimpose and like disentangle what exactly is happening. If you're trying to generalize to humans, you just sat in a room with the same ample food every day and nothing to do. Exactly. I think that's probably what happened. Which also, it's a less than ideal experiment. Again, because of the ethical concerns. But it's quite fascinating as to how they actually, like, what the result was. It's like independent of like it is a flawed study. It kind of might make sense as to what it actually means, right? That's kind of cool, I think. Kind of cool. This makes me worried about whether my pets need more to do. So what kind of pets do you guys have, Twitch Guy 2? Looking at the Stanford experiment results is interesting, even if we should ever hear it again. Yep. So Dame Karen, I think we kicked off the stream today talking about those psychological experiments that were highly questionable from an ethical standpoint and should not be carried out again. But then it is still interesting as a thought experiment. I don't think of any ethical way that you could actually be carrying them out, but it's still interesting to think about, let's say. 1 cat and 1 dog. Yeah, Twitch Guy 2. We have 4 cats, and so we have tons of cat trees and toys everywhere. And even then, you might wonder if it's enough. And dogs are even harder, right? Like, is a dog, depending on the breed, how much walking and how much like running it needs to do outside, and like learning extra things, right? Is hard. Problem with my cat is she's barely interested in toys. Dog is easy because I can just walk her. Could be the wrong kind of toy, right? Twitch Guy 2. Like our 4, they have very, very different preferences in their toys, where one will play with one like all day and the other one will never touch that one. Yeah, that could also be the issue, right? It's hard to, but cats are also like, they like to look out the window. It's hard to know though. I am not a vet. Psych major, I hate to say it, the history psychology does contain some very dodgy experiments. The results are still which are somewhat useful. Yep. There are, like you said, dodgy, and there could have, like, those older experiments could have been controlled a lot better, but it does give some potential insight into long-term hypotheses and like design of like not human experiments but other experiments that are mammalian related or trying to answer similar questions just with a different approach. It's pretty cool, I think, of how much there has been changed from the original approach of how the animals were treated in particular, and just like looking at the utopian experiment would be. Won't all the mice in the experiment be sacrificed? For what experiment, Claire? For what experiment? Not gonna lie, those bead roasts remind me of blind cords in a dangerous way. Oh, I gotcha. It seems to work for the mice, though. It seems to work. This one? No. They won't all be sacked. It depends very much on what the goal is. If it's just, it also depends on how they're assessing quality of life. If they also get like a good quality of life output, whether it be measured via stress hormone or something different, they may or may not sacrifice the mice for it. A lot of experiments do end up in sacrificing the mice, because if you have 2 different setups, one experimental and one control, then let's say if your output is like brain structure or brain RNA levels, you'll have to eventually sack the mice to figure out which one works or which one doesn't work. I don't know the end result of this experiment, but I can see outputs where they don't need to sack the mice. It's very dependent on the actual, like, how the study is formed and, like, what's the actual question for measuring, like, getting your answer, if that makes sense. I'm not sure what their end game is in terms of actually identifying that, if that makes sense. I think ties back into what we're chatting about is the need for enrichment for mice and rats. One thing that very nicely demonstrates is just how smart rats are, as well as, like, in versus to, like, mice, which are not as smart as rats but still fairly knowledgeable. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to show off just some of the knowledge that rats have and how smart they are, and kind of just show that off with a little bit of what their behavior is, like, capable of doing. I think that's a nice way to kind of round out the night. We talked about the ethics questions in psychological studies on humans. We talked about the studies on the rat and mouse populations that inspired the movie and the book, The Secret of NIMH. And then we also chatted a little bit about modern day treatment of the animals, which is much better. And so let's, finish out with how, the reason you need to have that modern day treatment is because of how intelligent the rats are and the mice, and they're most social than what you might imagine. It has amazing little toes. A rat that can detect TB and unexploded landmines. Like, guys, that is next level amazing. They're so cute, by the way. I think they look really, really cute.
Thanks for watching SciAnts Media, and be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons to help our channel grow and support our science outreach and education goals. We can be found on Twitch most days of the week, and be sure to join us here for our next video. Thanks again, and stay curious, everyone.